I think our clients love us is because we treat them like people. We are not just like a client or something on our checklist. We treat each person like their project is special and important and one of a kind because it is.
All right, y'all. So we are joined by another literary agent and my friend on the pod. Dani Segelbaum has nearly a decade's worth of experience working in traditional publishing. She began, like me, as an editorial assistant, except she was at HarperCollins and spent 3 years at the Carol Mann Literary Agency before joining ARC Literary in 2024. Dani represents a wide range of both fiction and nonfiction in adult and children's, working with New York Times bestselling and debut authors. And Dani is passionate about collaborating with authors from diverse backgrounds, same, to tell stories that are meaningful to them. In nonfiction, Dani is particularly drawn to books in the areas of women's issues, popular culture, illustration and photography, history, politics, self-help, and current events. She loves narrative nonfiction, biography, business, lifestyle, and cookbooks, and collaborates with a diverse range of authors, including illustrators, photographers, academics, psychologists, and journalists. Outside of her professional life, Dani enjoys spending time with her Aussie Doodle, who may make an appearance today,
Definitely.
trying out new restaurants with her husband, and indulging in her cookbook collection. Her guilty pleasures include reading the newspaper late at night and baking a never-ending array of treats for family and friends, many of which come from her extensive collection of cookbooks. Dani and I have known each other for a minute, but only recently got to work on a book together by our mutual client and friend of the pod, Caitlin V. Welcome to Kind of a Big Book Deal, Dani.
I'm so excited to be here. This is so fun. And I love that we can swear on this podcast. I feel at home.
It's the fucking best. I don't have a filter, so I'm not even trying. Like, I was like, they listed it as clean, and I was like, I asked my podcast producer, I was like, for real? And he's like, oh, he's like, they'll mark the explicit ones. And I was like, okay. All right, so I have to admit, you're not the first literary agent on the podcast. So Steve Troha of Folio Lit, who you know and I know, beat you to the punch. But that just means he covered the basic shit, and we get to go more into the weeds and more into the depth. So
Great.
I want to start with you and your story. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to leave a position in editorial at HarperCollins to become a literary agent in the first place?
It was funny, I guess. When I first joined HarperCollins, they asked me if I knew any literary agents, and I was like, I don't even know what a literary agent is. And then as I, started acquiring books and working with the agents that my bosses worked with, I very quickly realized, oh, I actually like their job better than mine. I really loved working with the authors from the start and coming up with ideas and really building that like author relationship, I guess. And I realized agents, that was primarily their job. So I decided, okay, I really want to explore sort of that side of publishing. And I was so glad I did because, that's the best part of my job is working so closely with the authors on everything from like a little blip of idea to a full book, So that's sort of how I say switch to the dark side, if you will.
I love it. I love it. And it's so funny because everyone's like, why aren't you an agent, Megan? Because we do so much project development with our authors. But I was
You
like,
do the agent stuff without being the agent, essentially.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I do all the editorial work of an agent without being an
Exactly.
agent. Which brings me to something interesting. So one of the differences between like the self-hybrid indie space in publishing and traditional publishing is the presence of literary agents. So why do you think having a literary agent is good for authors, and especially the entrepreneurs, experts, and creators who are listening to this podcast who want to work in the prescriptive or how-to space?
Yeah, it's something that I talk about with authors all the time is it comes down to what your goals are. Do you just want to write something and get it out and you don't care if, only a small number of people read it, or do you want it to be in bookstores nationwide, That's usually where I start is like how long and committed to you are part of this process, right? Finding a literary agent is not a quick thing. So I think it really comes down to like what do you see for yourself for your project? Do you see yourself becoming a career author? What does that look like? And that's sort of where I start. And then, I get into the reasons of why you need an agent, right? Whether it comes down to everything from contract negotiation, putting you in connection with, publishers at the big five, right? And beyond. They don't take submissions from people who don't have agents. You hate your cover and you want to, you need someone to help you negotiate getting a better cover. It could be anything. It comes down to your goals of, do you just want this out in the world and you don't care? Or do you want to traditionally publish with a Penguin Random House, a Simon and Schuster, a HarperCollins, and you want someone who is on your team negotiating for you and has your back every step of the way? Everything from how much money you're going to get, to how your royalties look, to what your cover is, to what your title is, and do you have control over even, requesting specifics for your title and subtitle, right? It's everything from the small to the big, and that's sort of our job, is to be your fearless leader, I guess, throughout the process. And when it comes to entrepreneurs, you guys, you work with people who are incredible business people. Like, take Caitlin, for example. She's an amazing businesswoman. But, a lot of times, even the best business people don't really understand the nuances of the publishing industry. And that's where we come in, to sort of say, here's how this is going to help your business. Here's what you should do. Here's how we can, have your cover sort of match your branding and your titles and things like that, where it's only going to help you as an entrepreneur grow. And part of that is getting your book in as many bookstores as possible and getting the coverage that it deserves. And so that's sort of how we help. That's a very long-winded answer, I realized.
I love that, though, because that's a really nuanced answer. I remember a conversation I had with my mom, of all people, when I was working, I think, at Simon and Schuster, and she was like, "Wait, do you work for the authors or do they work for you?" And I was like, kind of both.
Oh,
but both in our job and in your job, ultimately the editor works for the house, right? But like, they work, an editor at Simon & Schuster works for Simon & Schuster. But like, in our roles, both me as a professional collaborator, traditional publishing expert, and you as a literary agent, we work directly for the author. So although we have this second constituency of our colleagues at the publishing houses, they are a second constituency. Our authors come first.
Yeah, absolutely. My job is to, be bad cop, essentially. And whatever, the author wants, my job is to work with the publisher to make the author happy, right? That's the end goal. And they should. It's their project. It's something that they've worked on for so many years, put their heart and soul into. It should be a product that they're happy with and that they're ready to, scream from the rooftops that they wrote this book. So, we want the authors to be happy.
And there's inherently an imbalance of power, because the publisher has multiple books, hundreds of books, thousands of books a year at like a PRH, versus like the author, who often has like one book. In our spaces, we have one book often. There's only a couple of authors I've worked with that have had a second or third book. And so it's important to acknowledge that, and like, having, a professional collaborator on your side, having a literary agent on your side who has relationships with these people that aren't just limited to one book is a really powerful asset for authors to have.
Yeah. And it's an interesting balance, right? Because the publisher does have that institutional knowledge, and they do have the understanding of what sales looks like and what marketing and publicity look like. And usually their suggestions are to better help the book. And it's also my job to say to the author, here's where the publisher is coming from. Here's why they're saying these things and why they suggest, this should say this, or this looks like this. And for anyone, not even entrepreneurs, but any type of author, they don't have that understanding. Why would they? So, it's my job, along with the editor, to sort of sit there and help explain, here's why they're saying this, right? Which is sometimes confusing.
Yes. No, it makes sense, because you're kind of like an advocate on both sides. It's a lot of translation, right? Because I think a lot of times publishers or editors will say stuff and the author like pops off, not understanding the context. And so then it's for us to jump in and do a little, like, we do a lot of back channeling.
We do a lot of massaging. We do a lot of therapy. We do a lot of big feelings discussions. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Because I think a lot of it is translation, right? It's like, here's what the publisher's thinking, here's how they're operating, and then here's how that affects you. Versus like, authors that are on their own would just pop off because it's so emotional for them. It's not a product for them in the way it is for a publisher. Okay,
And
so
you
I
sort
want
of
to
have
talk
to
to
be
you.
that mediator of like, here's what you're both feeling. How can we come together in the middle here? So it's
Agreed.
fun. It's fun.
I love it. So, as an agent, when you're looking for people to represent, what do you look for in clients and projects?
It's a great question. I think it depends on whether it's children's fiction, nonfiction. We can start with nonfiction because that's generally what you do. For nonfiction, I'm definitely looking for that person that's a go-getter. That is like the
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost thing is, are you going to hustle? Are you going to essentially work your ass off to write this book and to sell this book? That's number one. I look at people's platforms. Unfortunately, like that's just the world we're in, is you
Yeah.
have to be someone, something to sell the book because the publisher is going to ask, why you? Why are you the one to write this? And you got to answer it. So that's also what I'm looking for. Someone who is a collaborator, someone who I don't feel like I'm going to have to, babysit or pull teeth to sort of get to
Mm-hmm.
the finish line here. This should be a comfortable collaboration for both of us, right? We're going to be spending a lot of time and a lot of energy together and we have to get along.
Yep.
So that's sort of like at, I guess, the baseline of what I'm looking for in a author partnership. But really it comes down to, especially for nonfiction in this environment, is can you sell this book? Who are you to write this book? And are you going to be a go-getter and hustle and really just promote the shit out of this book? That's
Yeah.
the big thing.
I mean, I harp on that a lot, right? It's this idea of like the platform isn't just you want to write a book and now you have a book deal. It's not how that works, right? You have to show that you're able to sell the book.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that comes in the form of selling other things, whether that's online courses, digital products, coaching,
Yep.
consulting, keynotes, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to talk about our mutual client. Her book's right that here, Caitlin V. So her book, Harder, Better, Longer, Stronger. I always have to double check that
I
title.
know.
Came out earlier this year, and it topped a lot of lists. Right? It was like, I love to say that it's number one in male impotence. It's like my favorite thing to drop on Amazon. But initially, even though she's got, I think, almost 1 million subscribers across social media platforms, including YouTube, I had a hard time finding an agent to believe in the project. So what did you see when, I sent you that proposal?
I was so excited to see this. I immediately knew it was gonna probably ruffle some feathers for people
Mm-hmm.
and still does, even though the book is out. I think people assumed that like no one was going to touch that because it was sex and men. Sex and women, okay. Lots of books on it. People love it. Sex and
Yeah,
men,
yeah.
no one wanted to touch it. And I was like, there's this gap in the marketplace. There is,
Right.
the come as you are for women. Where's the men's one? They need a book. And Caitlin was the perfect person to say, I've built my entire career on proving people wrong about this. And I have hundreds of clients, thousands of clients who are men who need a book. If they're going to pay hundreds of dollars for a course, what's stopping them from buying a $30 book? So I saw that as a fun challenge to be like, okay, I'm going to prove everyone wrong. There was a lot of editors even who were like, oh, I'm not even going to bring this to my team because I don't even know where to begin. I'm uncomfortable. And I knew there was going to be someone who also saw the vision that this
Yeah.
deserved to be out in the world. So
And it ended up being an editor at Hay House, which is perfect for this book.
yes,
And
yes.
it was so funny that I thought it was my next question was going to be what was the reception from the editors when you submitted it, but that uncomfortability. So there's like a lot of axioms or notions in publishing that like kind of are like old wives' tales.
Yep.
And one of those things is like men don't buy books,
Every
which
day I
is
hear
not
that.
it's not true, but it's like the actual truth. And I don't remember where I learned this, but it's like men don't buy books except when they do, those become massive bestsellers, right? And like I always remembered that. And one of my first successes in publishing was the Bro Code, which I acquired in like 2007, and it sold like I don't know 500,000 copies, some crazy shit. But like it's that idea of The Game by Neil Strauss, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Same idea, right? It's like men don't buy books, except when they do. They buy them
Except when they
en masse.
do. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I don't know if it was because it was written by a woman that people were like, oh, this is confusing. Editors, some loved it and just couldn't get their team on board. As you and I
Yeah.
both know, a lot of sales teams are men, you know? And so I think they were probably the gap of, oh, I don't think any of my friends are going to buy this or anyone I know that would buy this. And so some were just like, absolutely not. This is not for me. I'm not touching it. And, Hay House saw that there was a gap in the market and said, this needs to be out there, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But yes, I hear every day men don't buy books. And I don't know. My brother's a reader. My husband's a reader. I don't believe that. Some men read, you know.
A lot of men read. I think we undercut men a lot
I
in
do. I agree. I
like
agree.
yeah, I think we undercut men a lot, and I think that they write, they read, they're entrepreneurs. They might not be, they might be a smaller segment of the reading audience, but in nonfiction, I think they make up a big chunk
Yeah,
of
there's
the
not
readership.
exactly like a men's fiction section in the bookstore like there is the women's section, but
Hmm.
I think they're buying more books than we assume.
Yeah, my husband also a reader. He listens to audiobooks.
Yes.
But like it is this idea of like they do buy books, so like we should also serve them too. But I love that we brought up the preconceived notion of the editors and people at publishing houses who work at publishing houses with the sales, marketing, and publicity. It's that fallacy of just because I wouldn't do it means that no one would do it. And that is like a classic mental fallacy that like you assume everyone's experience
Especially
is
in
your
this
experience.
industry.
So
Especially
rampant.
in this. And I think like what I saw from Caitlin was you have to trust the author. She knows that there's a huge audience out there who are begging for this book. And she was
Yeah.
right. She was
She was
right.
absolutely right.
So I think it's like you got to trust the author. If they're selling courses and one-on-one therapy for thousands and thousands of dollars, of course people are going to buy a $30 book.
Yeah, of course they are. And she mobilized her audience. She got a ton of pre-orders. She was, in the top 10 of all sexuality books on Amazon. Like, she sold a lot of
Yes.
copies in the
It's
first
nice
couple
to
months on
say she
sale.
proved everyone wrong. So,
Yeah, I think that's totally true. Except for Hay House. Hay House believed in her the whole time. They
yes,
even moved
exactly.
her book up in the schedule to
Exactly.
be the first book out because they had bought another book about sexuality that they didn't want to compete with it. It's kind of
Hmm.
crazy, but I love it.
Hmm.
So, what are the lessons I think from working with Caitlin that you would apply to future clients or that you think could be helpful to the folks listening to this podcast, who, by the way, are entrepreneurs, experts, creators who want to be traditionally published?
Yeah. And I think what I loved working with Caitlin was she was a businesswoman. This was just a
Mm-hmm.
really fancy business card. And I loved that. She was like, I know what to put in this book. I know what this book should look like, and I know how to sell it. And that's what worked for her. And I would love to find a million more authors who, are also entrepreneurial and say, this is just an extension of my business. This is just another thing that I can sell. It just happens to be a
Yep.
book. And that's what I loved about working with her is she knew from day one what this book was going to look like. She knew how to sell it and it worked for her. I think, more authors should trust their gut that they can, just sell an extension of themselves. That's what people want. We don't need to come up with something crazy. Stick to what you know. Stick to your gut of like, this is what I've been so successful at selling in courses, in speaking
Mm-hmm.
engagements, and other things that, of course, people are going to want to buy this $30 book.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what has been incredible about working with Caitlin is she knows her audience really well.
Yeah. And she validated the ideas in other ways. So that's the secret of building platform that people don't
Hmm.
think about. They think, oh, I have to be like an Instagram influencer. And that's not
Right.
it at all. It is actually you're validating your ideas, you're testing your audience, you're talking to them about what they want to know, you're understanding their problem and giving a solution based on your expertise, which then gets distilled into the book. We took one of her courses that wasn't her best performing online course and used that as the backbone for the book. And although we changed it editorially slightly, we did look at it and said, hey, like these are the problems that men face. Let's write this out and make this we'll wrap a concept in it, which was, outlined, I think, in chapter 1, the idea that sex is everywhere. And like how you go to the grocery store is how you show up in bed, but which is the greatest analogy ever. But like that idea was like she had already done the course, and the course had made such a difference in our clients' lives. But it was already proven content. We just needed to organize it into book form. So Caitlin is one of many. How many clients do you represent, and how do you manage all of those authors in those books? How does that work?
Great question. How many clients do I have? I would say I probably have like 30 to 40 maybe, but they're not all active. I'm not fielding emails from 30 people,
right?
30 different people. Like Caitlin, her book just came out. She knows what to do. We're not exactly communicating every day. I have maybe another author who I am working on their proposal right now, and we are communicating all the time. Or someone whose book is about to come out, and maybe we're not going back on edits because the book is already done, but now we're talking about publicity and marketing. Or I have fiction writers who are off writing their whole novels right now, and I'm not going to see them for a year until they finish their book. So it sort of depends. Every day for a literary agent is different, which is why I love my job so much, because one day I'm working on a book about baseball, the next I'm working on a book about sex, the next I'm working on a book for kids. And it's fun. I mean, you're always doing something new, but sometimes it can be hard to balance when, you've probably had this happen where all of a sudden your authors all deliver on the same day.
Yes.
Did they talk to each other? Was it, let's all email Dani our manuscripts at the same time? Which was, it's great because we have so much to do, but it's also like, oh my God, all of you at once. But a lot of times, my authors are working on different things and are at different stages in their books that we're not all on the same path together. So it allows me to take on new clients because, I can fit them in somewhere along the way in my puzzle of where they are in the process. But there are those days where you're like, oh, okay, they all delivered on the same day.
So you and I have a different way of working than I would say the typical author would, right? When people work with me, they get the direct, if they're a good fit for you, I'm going to send the proposal to you because we worked together on Caitlin's book. I send you some proposals that haven't been a fit. But like, are you in the submission trenches? And what I mean by that, because I don't think I talked about this with Steve in our previous literary agent episode, is that most literary agents accept queries, especially on the fiction side. And that ends up being like, I remember when I was a baby editorial assistant, my roommate was an agent's assistant. And she would come home, and this is like 2005, so like before digital queries, she would come home with a stack like this and like lay on the couch and toss the ones that she wasn't interested in on the floor, and then leave like, she'd come home with 100 pages and she'd take 3, so like, are you in those trenches as well?
Yeah. My query tracker is a scary place. They give you like your stats at the end of the year, which I thought was really helpful. So last year on my query tracker alone, I got over 5,000 queries.
Wow.
And of those, I think I requested 35. And of the 35, I probably like offered rep to a handful.
Like 1, 2, 3, something like that.
Yeah. And also because I am now requesting a lot more fiction because I want to do more fiction. Last year was not a time for me to be doing a lot more fiction, so I was requesting less. I mean, I'll say query tracker is mainly fiction.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, because nonfiction is a different animal, and that's what I always try to tell people. And that's why I want to talk about it briefly. I just recorded a podcast episode earlier today about why nonfiction, how to self-help prescriptive people shouldn't write whole manuscripts, and it's mainly because of that. You don't need to query, and you can do a proposal instead. But I do think it's
worthwhile. You get a lot through referrals. You and I both do. A lot of our nonfiction is referrals.
Yep, because entrepreneurs, experts, and creators know each other, and when one starts talking about a book, pretty soon they start talking about the team that put them together with a book. It's not any different than if you take a mastermind, and all of a sudden everybody in that mastermind is talking to each other about stuff. It's not very dissimilar to that. But it's interesting because I think that's one of the value adds that working with someone like me brings people, is that like they don't have to be in those query trackers. Like I get to skip the line in a lot of ways,
do.
right? Like,
and you have relationships with some of the top agents in the industry that you're just sending out the proposal. I mean,
yep. It's direct, and it's
that's
almost
incredible.
like a submission. It's almost like a submission for you too, because like when you submit, your reputation goes with that proposal, right? So like an editor might love all your shit, and so you're gonna move them to the top of the pile. Or like when we were editors, when I was an editor, if we got a big agent, from William Morris or one of the bigger agents, we would know. Or on the flip side, if it was a pain in the ass agent, we'd be like, well, this is rep by this person. I don't know. Do we want to deal with that agent for this project? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's always that question of like, what's the up and down side of it in terms of like that reputational aspect coming. So yeah, it's super interesting. Okay, so with that, this is kind of a tricky question, but I want to ask it anyway. What do you think is your magic sauce or your unique approach when it comes to agenting and like traditional publishing in general? Like, what are you bringing to the party that maybe nobody else is?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be real and honest with you. Like, yes, this is a collaboration. The authors that I work with, we are a good, often personality fit. I am not going to be like some super scary, agent that, you can't email me, you can't call me, I'm a person. I'm a very, I would say, normal individual. And, that is why I think, especially at ARC in general, we talk about that. Like, I think our clients love us is because we treat them like people. We are not just like a client or something on our checklist. We treat each person like their project is special and important and one of a kind because it is. So I think, a lot of agents are probably intimidating, and for maybe they deserve that or not, but I think you're going to get a person when you're working with me. You're not getting some assistant. You're not getting AI. You're getting me. And you're getting, the people on my team who work at ARC with me. And I think that's what, sets us apart is you're getting a real working personal relationship. Most of my clients, I know about their lives. I know what's going on. And I think that's helpful in how I can help them best succeed, right? So I think that's what we're really good at, is that we're hardworking, we are committed and dedicated, but we are also really personable.
I love that. Because it's so funny. Publishing is like it's a retail business ultimately, right? But it's so personal and so loaded with expectations and emotions and goals and dreams and ambitions. And so it is really important, I think, to have that boutique atmosphere and that very one-to-one kind of relationship with each of your clients, because they're all going to need something different.
Right. We're not doing your taxes where you come to me once a year and say, here's the papers,
Yeah.
100 times a day. We're getting on Zoom calls and phone calls, and I'm reading your work that could be like something that you've spent 20 years working on, right? This is a very personal relationship. And so, we really, I think, pride ourselves on being personable and kind. And, I think that's what sets us apart from a lot of agents where they're big and scary and maybe you aren't getting that one-on-one touch.
That was definitely the case with Caitlin, because I remember her saying that she wanted to, like, the minute she met you, got off that call, she was like, I feel great about Dani. And she's like, I'll meet with the other people. But I'm really, like, it was such a vibe fit, and that's so, so important when it comes to agents.
Because how much time are we spending with these people? If we hate each other, if you're afraid to talk to me, this is probably not going to work out very well.
Yep. I haven't had any disasters. The only thing I've really had in recent memory is a client where she had the choice between a pretty big name agent that, everybody knows in the industry that repped one of her colleagues who was a very close colleague. and then another agent who's also super reputable, but she didn't have any like personal connections. And so she went with her personal connection agent, and she told me later she kind of regretted not going with the agent she had the better vibe with. And where I kind of stand apart from that, because some of my clients will be like, what do you think? And I was like, what's most important is what you think. But with that now, with my client expressing that regret, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, if I think you have a better vibe, I'm going to say, hey, go with the better vibe. Like there's no, just because your friend had success with this agent doesn't mean they're the right agent for you. And that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like anything else, it might be a fit for someone, but it's not a fit for you. And again, it comes down to your goals. What are your goals? How do you want this relationship to look like? What do you want the final product to look like? And, we're often working with these people on one book for 2 years. So it does need to have a vibe fit, because you're going to be working with them for a long time.
Absolutely. I always say a good literary agent relationship should be someone you feel like you could have a drink with, and that you also trust your money with, like that you could give bank account information to and not worry about it. Like that's like the level, right? It's very,
I like
reminds
that.
me of a good lawyer in a lot of ways. But like it's that. So you want to be able to talk frankly, and trust them to advocate for you, while also then being able to have like camaraderie and friendship and like a good working relationship ultimately.
Absolutely. We should be able to go get a drink or a cup of coffee, and maybe we're not even talking about the book at all. You're also trusting me with, this huge, huge, project and business, and yes, your bank details. So that is true.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Be like, I should be able to trust you with my bank details, and also like that I could like leave you with a cocktail and not worry about getting roofied in the bathroom, right? Like
exactly. That's a low bar, but yeah.
It's not. I mean, yeah, it's a high bar or low bar. I don't know. Okay, so what do you wish authors would ask you about traditional publishing or the publishing process?
I think what authors, I always say, comes back to vibe check, right? How is the communication style? I've worked for people who are like, don't you dare email me. And then there's people who are like, yeah, this is, two-way street here. I would love for them. I think a lot of authors have this notion that marketing publicity is a guarantee from the publisher. And then they get to that time and it's the opposite. As we know, I think, I wish they asked more about that and knew how much of like an uphill battle the selling of the book would be. And because I think they think, we're getting a book launch party and maybe a book tour, and my book is going to be in this newspaper, in that magazine, on that podcast. And then when the time comes, that's often not the case, that it's coming from the publisher all the time. So I think, I wish they asked more about that I don't think they know that the marketing publicity oftentimes falls 90% on them.
Yeah, that's a big piece of education that I always want to bring to the table, is that publishers don't know how to market your book because they can't market everything. In the last year, I've worked on a diet book, a business book for Black entrepreneurs, a business book for educators, and a sex book for men. How are they going to reach all those people? And those are just 4 books. Penguin Random House is publishing 1,000 books a year, maybe more. How are they getting to all those audiences? They aren't. They are a distributor. They are a capitalist. They are an investment. They are partnering with you on this, and they're going to share the profit. That's what they're going to do. That's how they're set up. They're not very God people. They are venture capitalists. They are sharks on Shark Tank. And when you think about that way, then you're like, okay, cool. I'm partnering with these people who are going to get my book to my bookstores. They're going to get my books to my event if I happen to have one. They're going to get my book, on Amazon with the right metadata, so it reaches people that look at my YouTube in case of Caitlin and all of that. Like it's more that than it is like, oh, because I got this book deal now, this magic is going to happen without me.
The hard part's done. Right.
And
you can't sit back.
It's the beginning. It's not the end.
If anything, writing the book was the easy part,
Yeah, writing the book is that's why I focus on it.
Yes. Exactly. And I think, that's why that marketing and publicity of how the hell are you going to sell this book? That is the most important part, because the publisher is going to come back to you during that time and say, okay, go do that. you know?
Mm-mm.
So I think that is what I wish authors asked about. And I think that's the agent's job too. It's not our job. We're here to help. We're here to advise. But we are not, publicists. We are not marketers at the end of the day. So, that's why I love working with people who are go-getters, who are like, yeah, I have no problem. I'm going to sell the shit out of this book.
A lot of people, a lot of our clients take that as like a personal challenge of like, oh,
Yes. Yes.
here's
I
this
think like it fueled Caitlin.
oh yeah. Like if you tell like a couple of my clients that I was like, yeah, here's 20,000 books. I have a client whose book's coming out with Hay House in June. And I was like, yeah, 20,000 books establishes your book pretty much in the market the first year. New York Times bestseller is a little bit of a reach because it's curated. Nobody knows how they pick. But USA Today is totally like within most people's realm that we work with. Platformed authors, with 100,000 followers or more, the ability to sell 20,000 books in a year. USA Today bestseller is totally within the reach for those folks. And I was like, if you want to do that. And she just was like, fuck it. I'm going for all of it. Like, she's like, USA Today, I got that. But I'm going to mobilize my people and I'm going to do everything I can for like 3 years to set that up.
Yeah.
And, it was a personal challenge for her to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, she wanted to, cross it off her list. And that is a really powerful incentive. And I would love for more entrepreneurs, experts, and creators to think of publishing their book that way, because it's not ultimately the book that makes you money. It's all the money that comes from like your author platform and like growing and selling that book and the book opening up more opportunities,
Yeah, I wish all my authors sort of thought like that. I think, for other nonfiction or fiction or children's, they don't have that business mindset because they're not business people. Where, even though it's a women's fiction book, you still have to think of it as like, this is a business thing. You are an entrepreneur and you still need to sell it.
Yeah. It's still a product at the end of the day.
Still
I
a
think
product. You're still buying it in the store.
Art is a product, right? Like my husband makes pottery. That's a product. He's making, usable pottery. So he's making mugs and bowls and plates and planters and things like that. But it's still a product, ultimately, even though it's art, right? Even though he's creating it with his hands, literally artistry, right? Same thing as me. I'm creating art with my hands on a little keyboard. But still, it's that whole idea. It's still a product at the end of the day.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, so last question. So based on all the data I have, the entrepreneurs, experts, and creators who are listening to this want a book deal, but they need to develop their book's potential and author platform before really getting going on it, before writing a proposal or even sending a query to you. So based on that, what would be your best advice for those folks in terms of making their dreams come true?
Yeah, I think you really have to, instead of selling a product, you're selling yourself. You're selling, whether it's talks you give, whether you have like this awesome Substack or millions of followers on Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is, you're selling the book before the book's even here, right?
Yeah.
You're selling, your brand, which is you, your concept, your tagline, whatever it is. You really have to, I like that you're selling 3 years ahead of time, this concept, this idea, before it actually hits print. So,
and you're not calling it your book, to be clear. You're validating the concepts, the frameworks. You're saying like, hey, the thing about platform building that I think goes unsaid is that it validates your idea in a way that nothing else can, right?
Yep.
So like you putting your idea out in the world and then getting feedback on it proves there's an audience, right? Like, was there an audience for entrepreneurs, experts, and creators who had a book deal for a podcast like this? I don't know. Let's see. And then, oh shit, we had 20,000 downloads in the first year. Apparently this is needed.
People want to hear this.
Let's keep moving. But I wouldn't have known that without trying it. And same idea, right? Like I have, people come to me and they're like, my framework worked for me. And I was like, okay, great. Well, does it work at scale or does it break, right? Yeah. I wrote a diet book this year and I did the diet because I wanted to see where it would break. Because in the past, it was awesome. In the past, about 10 years ago, I wrote a diet book and I was like, I love olives, but why are olives in every single recipe in this book? Because my husband doesn't like olives. Yeah. So this isn't going to work for him. Can we find another source of healthy fat, right? There's like all this idea of like, you learn so much by building a platform, and and if you want to make an impact, that is the way to do it, right? Like that is the way to do it. It's not by writing a book that sits somewhere on a shelf that doesn't get read.
Exactly. And what I love about you is you really immerse yourself in every book you write, like doing the diet. By the end of Caitlin's book, you knew more about men and sex than most people knew.
So much stuff. So much stuff. And it was like, Caitlin calls it out and she's like, I think she says like, I'll be a hit on golf courses, because I was going to my golf league that whole summer. I was writing the book and being like, guess what I learned this week about men's sexuality? And like, they gave us, my golf league friends gave us like, honestly, a handful of lesbians gave us feedback on the cover. Because I was like, look at these covers. What do you guys think?
I love that. I love that. Yes. That's what we need.
But it does, I mean, it kind of lends to the fact that like, you need a book team when you write a book, especially as an expert, a creator, an entrepreneur who is busy running a business, running a brand.
That's where we come in. We're here to make this easier for you.
Yeah, that's where, I mean, what we really deliver is leverage. Yes, do we deliver a great proposal that gets you a great agent like Dani and a book deal? Yes, 80% of the time we do that. But we're buying you leverage the whole time, right? Yep. Like, you can do other things. Like Caitlin didn't have to stop her YouTube. She didn't have to stop. She launched a podcast, I think, while running.
She was busier than ever.
Yeah, because I was helping her. And so that was really the important thing. And you could kind of do your agent thing too, because you knew we were going to deliver the manuscript on time and we weren't going to have any problem editorially as well with Hay House. So that was a really good thing. And then, you know, I got to show off for Hay House. So now her editor is one of my favorite people. So very fun things.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Well, Dani, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We really appreciate you. And yeah, for all of you listening, let me know what other questions you want from literary agents and editors. We're going to have more people this year on the Kind of a Big Book Deal podcast from traditional publishing. So hit me up, you know, in the show notes. You can send me fan mail anytime. And until next time, cheers to your success. Thanks for tuning into the Kind of a Big Book Deal podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you subscribe and also leave a review. Not only is this good for my ego and annoying for my enemies, but it also helps more entrepreneurs like ourselves find this podcast. Also, I'm pretty sure it's good karma. See you next time.